I'm going to be talking to Michael Bernstein, Executive Director of Prosperity, about how to encourage investments in clean energy and decarbonization of the Canadian economy around carbon pricing. So, welcome to the interview, Michael.
Thanks, Markham.
Now, this is a bit of a technical issue. Why do we need to provide guarantees to investors around carbon pricing?
Well, in a word, it's really uncertainty. Investors today have a whole series of projects that would be economic to invest in at $170 per ton carbon price. But the challenge is they don't believe they can depend on that carbon price because there's too much political uncertainty. And they particularly worry about the risk that a future government comes in and changes the carbon pricing schedule, or for that matter, cancels it altogether, so that the money they've invested on the premise that carbon pricing will be there turns out to be a poor investment.
Right. I hear this all the time with new technologies, new policy. They want to de-risk the situation. Okay, so we've got that. Now, one of the options that's being considered is carbon contracts for difference. What is that?
This is a commitment to pay out to companies a certain specified amount of money in the event that the carbon price is revised or canceled. So let's take a specific example. Let's use 2030 for a specific case here. And of course, the carbon price is expected to be $170 a ton. Well, what the federal government could do if they were using a carbon contract for difference is they could write into a contract with, say, a counterparty that had a carbon capture project, that if the price does not reach 170 a ton, that the government will pay out the difference between the carbon price and a specified dollar amount. So that might be $170 fully if the carbon price was fully canceled. Or maybe the government says, you know what, we'll guarantee you $120 or $150. So you know that you'll at least get that amount if the carbon price schedule is in fact revised.
Isn't this a clever way for the existing government, which brought in the industrial carbon price in Canada, to handcuff future governments when it comes to carbon policy?
Well, I think that the primary objective here is to unlock a whole series of decarbonization projects. And our sense is that would, in fact, be able to do that. Although there is another element of this, which maybe we can come to later, around de-risking the carbon credit markets as well. But you are right that one effect this would have, even if it isn't the primary motivation, is to make it more difficult for future governments to cancel the carbon price, because they would incur a big fiscal penalty in order to do that. And that, of course, creates more confidence from private sector investors, even ones who don't necessarily have these contracts signed, that it's not as likely as it might have otherwise been that a future government might cancel the carbon price.
Well, let's talk about de-risking carbon credit market. Explain what you mean by that, please.
Yeah, so right now, most industrial players in Canada, when they're considering decarbonization projects, there's two areas that they're looking at for whether the project can be economic, whether they'll get a sufficient return on investment and otherwise. One is, what kind of fees will they avoid in terms of carbon pricing? But the second is, what kind of credits can they generate, or what kind of revenue, rather, I should say, will they generate by selling credits that they may earn by decarbonizing a particular facility? As you would know, Markham, today, the way the carbon price is structured for industry, the carbon price only applies to, it depends on the facility, but let's just say about 20% of emissions. So that remaining 80% of emissions could potentially become credits that the facility could sell to other interested parties. But of course, they need to have some confidence that there will be stable prices for those credits going forward.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but when the Ford government in Ontario canceled the cap and trade program, there were a number of companies that were left with credits that had no value anymore, and that was a bit of an issue for those companies.
Absolutely, no, you're fully right about that, and part of the idea behind contracts for difference and other ways you might backstop this credit market as well is to reduce the risk and increase the costs on future governments of changing course the way the Ford government chose to do. In the end, you can never guarantee anything 100%, and there is still a risk that a government might come in and not only change the policy, but also, like the Ford government did, legislate to reduce the downside risk and the penalties that they were exposed to from taking that action. So it is a very relevant example.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for this. Appreciate your insights.
Good to talk to you.